Hello, BookTube. It's a beautiful blue sky sunny day here in Boston. Just delightful, delightful weather. Cool in the morning, warm-ish in the afternoon. Never actually cold, even at 3 in the morning. Never actually hot, even at 3 in the afternoon. I'm savoring it all the more because I think it's going to end for a bit. Not the temperature. The temperature is going to stay in the 70s Fahrenheit every day from now until, as far as I can see, the end of November. But the sun's going away. I think a bank of clouds is coming in probably tonight and will be here for a couple of days. So this glorious sunlight just spilling over everything will be gone. And I felt after yesterday's video that I owed you a mail haul, and that made me feel bad because it's Sunday, so there is no mail. But there was mail. There was indeed mail. A ninja mail delivery happened. Must have been late last night, 9, maybe even later than that. That I only discovered today. So we do have mail to go through. We have a bunch of periodicals and a couple of packages. The one of the first periodicals is the New Republic. I don't have a whole lot of patience with the New Republic in terms of the political articles that appear at the beginning. Like, for instance, there's a long article here about Chief Justice Roberts, and a long article about the 1970s, and a long article about the end of the neocon movement. There's an article by Timothy Noah called "God Save Us from Economists," and they are interesting, but they are very much of the moment. They tend not to interest me as much as for me, the main selling point of the New Republic, which is an enormous amount of books coverage. It's not it's not a book review, but half the issue is given over to books coverage in every issue. And as opposed to doing it the way that I would probably do it, which is to have, if you've got, what have you got here? Actually, let's determine this. 20 pages. The 20 pages devoted to books coverage. If I had that, it would probably be 20 different books. It would be page after page after page of one-page, 800-word reviews. So here you get, this first one is by Alexander Zaitchik, and it is a review of What We Owe the Future by William McCaskill, which is about long-termism. And here you get, that's page 1, and it goes on. That the mark, you got a second page there, see? That mark means that the article is over. So that's long. That's a long article, probably 2,000-3,000 words. I wouldn't do that. If I had 20 pages, this would be a review of What We Owe to the Future. There would be a headline for the review. It would be a good headline instead of a boring one. There would be a small thumbnail of the book's cover. I don't know why the New Republic does this, but I don't believe any of this falderall is not showing you the cover. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. We judge books by their cover, quite rightly. So there would, if I did it, there would be a title for this review, and then a thumbnail for the book, and then 3 columns of a review. That's not the way they do it. That's perfectly all right. It allows me to soak in longer reviews. I had an editor once who told me a long, long time ago that if you can't make your points in 800 words, then what is 2,000 words going to allow you to do? I tend to agree with that. I hate to say it because some of my best friends write long form book stuff, and I wouldn't have those pieces any shorter. I guess it's a question of definition, right? The difference between a long-term meditation or consideration of a book and a newspaper-style review. But long-termism is what's being reviewed in this long discussion, and it's the view that the main goal of humanity should be to survive in the stars, in the future, in the far future. I think long-termers are specifically specify the Virgo star cluster. I don't quite know why, but the idea is any amount of suffering and stuff cast off the back of the sled along the way now is well worth it for that long-term goal. And I have to agree with that long ago editor. I don't think I would have gotten any more out of this piece than I would have gotten out of its 800 word version. No offense to the author at all. Same thing with the next one. The author is Adam Kirsch, whose stuff I really, really like, and this is his long review of that book about the early romantics that we saw on this channel. We saw the advanced copy and the finished copy. His review of Magnificent Rebels by Andrea Wolf. And as you can see, it goes on and on and on. After a certain point, it always strikes me that what you'll be doing at that point will be recounting the book, which I guess can be entertaining. Certainly, he is entertaining when he does it. Same thing with the next piece. Siddhartha Deb writes allegedly a review of Afterlives by Abdul Razak Gurna. I almost showed you just the words. Why they don't put a cover image here, I don't know. It's long. It absolutely wouldn't exist if not for the author's recent winning of a major literary prize. But there's also a review of, which one is this? See, the review, I've got Pitchfork Politics by Claire Potter. Nowhere is there a mention of what's being reviewed. You have to dig around for it, which we saw this on this channel too, though. Partisans by Nicole Hemmer. And at one point, Claire Potter writes, though the shadow of Donald Trump hangs over partisans, the author does not focus on the last president. Instead, she shifts the lens to a set of much bigger questions. How did one of America's two major parties become dominated not just by vicious public attacks that used to be the province of undercover dirty trick specialists, but by a proud rejection of democracy itself? How did virulent nativism, homophobia, and racism spread from the far right, where the Republican Party successfully contained it for decades, to take over a whole political party? When did culture wars promoted between both right-wing pundits acting like politicians and right-wing politicians acting like pundits stop simply motivating voters and shift the center of gravity in the GOP to conspiracism and illiberalism? So she says, though the shadow of Donald Trump hangs over the book, the author does not focus on the last president, instead giving us this barrage of allegedly bigger questions. I'm sure that if you don't live in the alternate reality that I mentioned in yesterday's Rant Email Haul, I'm sure you recognize that the answer to every one of those allegedly bigger questions is the single word Trump. So I don't think there's much focus shifting going on in this book. He is the single word answer to all of those questions. But that was the New Republic, largely a depressing magazine, except that I love the fact that books get such exorbitant coverage. I just wish that the books weren't so political. There are 4 books covered in this issue, plus a profile of Gurna, and of the 4, I'd say it's an easy argument to be made that 3 of them are hot button political. Maybe that's a editorial policy. There's also The New Yorker, great Halloween cover there of The New Yorker, which had all sorts of interesting things in it. I was kind of hoping that the letters page would be encouraging, but not this time around. But one thing that The New Yorker does at the front is the Talk of the Town session, which is these little smaller pieces that didn't warrant a whole investigation. They don't warrant multiple pages. And I read one of them. One of them is about the group of people who go in to stores to track prices and chart them. And the author of the piece is Katya Savchuk, and the consumer price indexer that she talks to doesn't want to tell her anything about himself. He's super, super secretive. And he does tell her things about his profession. But one thing I noticed about this, I mean, it's not long, right? It's just those 3 columns and a bit of this one. But the one thing I noticed about it is how conspicuously well written it is. So now I'm wondering, Katya Savchuk, have I seen her writing before? Sometimes the Talk of the Town the New Yorker will try out writers that they're maybe wondering, would this be a credit to us to give them longer space? I really, really enjoyed it, and I love the way it ends, harping on the non-disclosure nature of the business. She's talking about her price indexer. He has a sense of where prices are heading each month, but he remains tight-lipped. Quote, "That's like the biggest taboo question," he said. He has a colleague named Sam who has a CPI joke that he likes to tell. Quote, "A Bureau of Labor Statistics economist is asked, is the glass half empty or half full? To which he or she responds, it's a 16-ounce glass with 8 ounces of water." I did not know. I could stand to have read a whole piece on price indexers. I thought it was fascinating. If I'd been, on the editorial table of the New Yorker when they were, if I'd been at the table when they were planning this issue, I would have wanted that author to write an whole article on that subject. But also, David Remnick, a poobah at the New Yorker, does a wonderful little heartfelt mention of Peter Sheldau, their art critic who just recently died. That's really, really good. He quotes from a long-ish essay, "Longish for Peter, more a sprinter than a miler." He is at his very best, his most incisive, insistent, and personal. And then he quotes from a paragraph about Mondrian, the veracity of which I could not disagree with more, but I agree with Remnick that it really does show what we lost. This is the quote. "Critical attention to him may rise and fall for anyone undertaking to pay it, though there can be no ups or downs in Mondrian's importance relative to other artists past, present, and to come. There's only a steady state of inexhaustible meaning, beggaring comparison and defying definition. Even the critically consummate Jansen, with his magnum opus of a biography, can merely dance around and not penetrate the adamantine conundrum of the Dutch magus's dead stops in lived time." And Remnick, who I've had my go-rounds with, but when he's right, he's right, and when he's eloquent, he's eloquent. He goes on to write, "As we were going to press this past Friday, word came that Peter had died. It's hard to listen to this line. This line is so great. It's hard to imagine what he must have summoned to write like that in his last weeks." That is a very good writer paying a very good tribute to another very good writer. I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. But there were a couple of other things in this issue that I wanted to go on about. Didn't I? Weren't there? I thought there was a couple more. A long article about a race car, a long article about the Democratic Party. No meaningful cartoons. You all know I'm a connoisseur of New Yorker cartoons. There wasn't anything in here that I would even think was memorable, much less that I would want to save. Oh, right, of course, Adam Gopnik himself does a long review of the Stacy Schiff biography of Samuel Adams that I read and thought was a bit perfunctory. It's kind of surprising. James Wood, another poobah at the New Yorker, also does the new Orhan Pamuk. I liked his review a lot better. And then the last periodical was the TLS, the Times Literary Supplement, which I love. This issue is great, as they all are. So let's just go through it at a walk instead of me hopping all around. The first piece in here is by Alan Forrest, and it is a dual review, which is not easy to do. Multiple book reviews are not easy to do. Editors love them. Editors grab them because you cover more books that way, but not every writer can do it. And this is about 2 books on Napoleon. The first one is by Michael Broers. It's called Napoleon, The Decline and Fall of an Empire. It's 800 pages, came out from Pegasus Books, I'm assuming this year. And the second one is one that we just saw on this channel, Napoleon at Peace by William Doyle. And at one point in the review, Alan Forrest is writing about the Broers volume. And he writes, "Too often Napoleon has elicited either unquestioning admiration or undiluted hatred from his biographers, with some seeing him as a peerless god of war, others as a despotic usurper responsible for murderous crimes. Broers is a refreshing exception here, for though he has a certain amount of empathy for Napoleon and does not conceal his admiration for his civic achievements, especially the administrative and judicial reforms he imposed across his empire, this is no hagiography. And I read that and thought, well, sorry, this author has already had 2 bites at the apple for me. This is, I think, the 3rd volume in Bro's apparently ongoing biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. And I reviewed the first 2 volumes, not as a dual review. I reviewed the first one when it came out, then I waited a couple of years. When the second one came out, I reviewed that too. If I remember, I will leave a link to those reviews down below, but let's just put it this way. They were so far from not being hagiographies that I was not inclined to get and read the next volume, which is a pretty staggering amount. You have to go to a great length to get me to say, enough of this. I don't need to read another volume. It's pretty exorbitant to do that. So in this case, Forrest is just wrong. And I don't know why that is. There's precious little actual discussion of Bro's book in the review. So I could guess that maybe in order to do a dual review, if you remember, Napoleon at Peace is short. And it's not 800 pages. It's not the 3rd volume in a series. So it's possible that Forrest just looked at that longer review, that longer book, took a few things from it, but did not actually dig down to see whether or not it was hagiography. It's the only explanation I come up with for being just flat wrong. But then we get to the letters page of the TLS, where I often bring you straight to the letters page because that's often where dust flies. And one of the ways that dust often flies, very predictably, is when an author does something that authors should almost never do, which is to write in and complain about a review. I know that you authors out there have heard this before, and it's absolutely true. Take it from me. You've heard it from publicists and from publishers and from your friends. Take it from a critic. Take it from a reviewer. It is a bad idea to do. It makes you look whiny and entitled. You will almost always lose in the exchange, in the court of public opinion, in the court of public appearance. The only reason that I say almost is because there is one possible justification for writing in to complain about a review. Now, you getting a full-length review in the foremost literary journal in the world, I would think even then you would just complain to your publisher. If the one reason that you can have to do it is if there's a factual error. If the reviewer is misrepresenting the facts of your work. They can't misrepresent how they're reading your work. They can only, but if they misrepresent the facts, you could be seen to have a justification for writing in. Even there, you are far more justified to write a letter with proof, with quotations, not just your word against the reviewer, write with proof to your publisher and have them contact the journal to run a correction. But the letters page is a lot higher profile than any little corrections box. So an author wrote in along exactly those lines. I thought I would read this to you to give you an example of this kind of phenomenon when it's done at least as right as it ever can be. The author is Paul Clements, writing from Belfast, but we won't hold that against him. And he wrote a biography of Jan Morris. While I am grateful for Norma Clark's review of my biography of Jan Morris, I would like to correct one of her assertions. She states that, quote, "we don't learn of friends or important relationships," which is manifestly untrue. Morris's friends are quoted in different chapters throughout the biography. Then, for a long paragraph, a huge length of a paragraph of names and specific dates, Paul Clements goes on about who those friends are. Friends in journalism, friends among literary agents in both the UK and the US, friends in the public, including Sir Edmund Hillary, and fellow writers, fellow writer allies Paul Theroux, Jonathan Rabin, Colin Thubrand, Robert McCrum, Jim Perrin, Pico Iyer, Michael Shapiro, and Dom George are some of those who knew Morris personally, shared gripes and friendships, and took part in literary festival discussions with her throughout the years. There is a considerable quoting from letters and interviews in my biography from many of the aforementioned. Even a cursory glance at the index highlights their relationship/friendship with Morris, which is spelt out in detail. in the book. So there you have an author saying that the reviewer, not saying in so many words, but saying the reviewer didn't read the book or didn't check. The reviewer may have had an impression that friends were not well represented, but the did not then go to check to see if that impression was true, which is something you absolutely have to do. I've had that happen in many reviews. I will read a book first for impressions. I will go through, usually the advanced copy, specifically reading it for impressions. Does this seem hectoring? Does this seem badgering? Does this seem fawning? Why do I keep getting that impression? So I'm 2/3 of the way through this book about, the Earl of Southampton, and I get the impression that there's an agenda here, and I can't quite pin it down. Well, there's nothing wrong with having that impression, but when you're done, if you're going to be responsible for writing a review that other people are going to read, then when you're done, you have to say, all right, well, I'm done. That impression stayed strong all throughout. I never got rid of the impression that there was an agenda being checked off here. What you are then obliged to do is find an example where that struck you and dig in to find out whether or not it's true. So if you're reading a biography of some modern industrialist and you get to a paragraph that seems bought and paid for, it is not ethical for you to report your impressions. You have to go back to that paragraph and find out. If you dig in on that paragraph that gave you that impression, you find out that the reviewer worked for 20 years and got a lifetime pension from a company that used to be owned by the subject of the biography, well, then you're right. But the book's not going to tell you that. You need to dig in and find that out for yourself before you present your impression to your reader. I don't know if you can hear those. Probably you can. Lots and lots of sirens for a Sunday. Good Lord. And yet never around when you need them. just 2 nights ago. There's a right nearby. The reason there's so much traffic noise here is because there's an intersection right nearby. And it's a weird intersection. There's a big light hanging there, but it's a V, and one is a feeder road from up a hill, and I guess it's trickier than it looks to a pedestrian. It all looks easy, but I guess it's trickier than it looks because there have been 20 accidents at that intersection in the last 10 years. And there was one the other night. It was after our evening dog walk. Because I try to keep nighttime dog walks with the Bean to a minimum. She has terrible night vision, just terrible. She sees things that aren't there, much like a lot of you do. She just can't make out details in the dark at all. We were settled. I was reading, and you hear the by now, I hate to say it, but by now a familiar sound when you know that a car is going to hit something. There's a long squeak of the brakes, and then there's that hanging moment when the driver is no longer hammering on the brakes because they're recoiling. They haven't hit anything yet, but they're not braking the car anymore. So there's a quiet moment that hangs there suspended, and then you have an impact, the sound of an impact. And that happened the other night. I just waited and watched while the sirens came for a legitimate reason that time. But anyway, let's hope there's no more and that you couldn't really hear them. I've noticed a lot when I replay. Videos that the sound isn't as bad to you as it is to me. So, but there is also a piece in here, the commentary in the middle of the issue, that I couldn't help but smile about. It's this thing here, Missing in Action, and it's by Suzanne Raitt, and it's a long essay about Jacob's Room by Virginia Woolf, which has its 100-year anniversary this year. And I couldn't help but smile, not because the piece is fairly pro forma, I have to admit. Rereading Jacob's Room during its centenary year, it's hard not to think about the innumerable global conflicts since the one that destroyed our protagonist. Stuff like that. Not only does it write itself, but I don't want to read it. And I especially don't want to write it. God help me. I feel so sorry for the freelance writers out there who have to pitch crap like that anywhere at any time. And then just grind it out. Just go, if you get a yes, you just grind out a piece where But the thing that made me smile is that the back column of the TLS for the better part of half a century, the NB column, has mocked the regularity with which literary freelance hacks will go at anniversaries books. They list anniversaries in the NB column. Will say, well, you're going to be hard up for an idea, or your editors are, because there's no originality in the business. It was kind of funny that they actually ran such a thing, even though they mock it. They also did. We got a movie review of the Banshees of Inisherin, and also a theater review of Blues for an Alabama Sky. See that? And we've got a photo. We've got a stage photo from Blues from an Alabama Sky, which is at the National Theater until the 5th of November. And that made me smile because the literary journal, where I am one of the editors, Open Letters Review, has a theater critic, Christopher Day, and he went to that. We ran a review of that on Open Letters. It's a source of absolute joy for me that I have an on-the-spot theater critic who's actually good at what he does. I love it. What I wouldn't give if I had somebody in New York who was willing to cut their teeth writing theater reviews for Open Letters about stuff in New York. I imagine it would have to be off Broadway, because Broadway shows are very expensive now. But no one's expecting you to feather your nest and live forever at Open Letters Review. What I'm expecting, what a lot of people have already done, is launch themselves from there. I don't know why. I'd love it if I had a Boston or New York theater critic. But there's also Christopher Priest, the great science fiction author. Christopher Priest writes a review of Rob Wilkins' new biography of his friend Terry Pratchett, who's a science fiction and fantasy author I've never liked, never been able to get at him at all, never get the sense that he was anything other than just riffing. But Priest notes that the biographer has a free hand with Pratchett's negative side. So naturally, I read this paragraph with a little bit of relish, since I don't like the guy's writing. It's naturally human that I sort of, wet my lips at the idea that there might be a moral reason for that. Of course, that isn't true. But the paragraph in question goes, he did not suffer fools and made sure they knew. He was ruthless with experienced book editors who made suggestions about what they saw as necessary revisions. He insisted on tight control of any director or production company that wanted to make a film of his work. He stalked out of book prize events if he realized he was not about to win. He deeply resented J.K. Rowling overtaking him as Britain's best-selling author. He made a bridging loan to a business associate, using the known inheritance due from her father as a security. Whenever he saw her after that, he would say, "How's your father? Is he well? Oh, pity." He bragged that whenever he boarded a plane, he turned left into the first-class compartment while his friend and collaborator Neil Gaiman turned right. Now, I love reading a paragraph like that, but I deeply distrust it, as you should too. How do you know that he was bitter about J.K. Rowling? Did he say it, or did he joke about it? For instance, what was it? He stalked out of book prize events if he realized he was not about to win. Did that happen? And if so, did it happen more than once? And if it did happen only once, did it happen because he wasn't going to win, or because he had something else to do? Also, that bit about the inheritance loan. How's your father? Is he well? Oh, pity. If that happened, that strikes me as a joke. You're given no context. You'd have to read the book, I guess, to find out the context. But there was also an article in here that a review of a book that I don't think will ever come out in America. I'm tempted to spring for a copy on Book Depository or whatnot. The review is by Edmund Gordon, and the book is Blurb Your Enthusiasm by Louise Wilder, and it's about book blurbs. And right away in this review, you're confronted with the fact that that has two different definitions in the UK and in the US. In the US, a book blurb is a chunk of a review or a specifically written one or two sentences of praise for the book. In the UK, the book blurb is the jacket description. It's the prose that we read on this channel all the time. We're going to read as soon as I get to the mail. I promise I will get to the mail. It's the jacket description there. That's what this book is about. It's not about the blurbs in the sense that I automatically think about them. It's about jacket descriptions, and it's a pan. Edmund Gordon did not like this book. At one point, he writes, here is a small taster of her methods as a historian. And then he quotes her. I'm afraid I'm going to do that too. I can't resist. It wasn't until around 400 CE that scrolls were replaced with the rectangular folded codex we recognize as a book today. Initially, these were made from animal skin parchment, hence the spine of a book, and were therefore rare and precious objects. Then paper came along, thanks China, followed by Gutenberg and his printing press in 1439. Thanks, Germany. Insert time is passing style montage here, and suddenly books were everywhere. I was reading this review, I read that part, I got to the part where the author is saying that because books were printed on animal skins, that was somehow an etymological provenance for why we call it, say that they have a spine. I read that, thought I've never read that anywhere else. That is certainly not true, but I need not have worried because Edmund Gordon is on the case. He writes, even if you can stomach the relentlessly fun style, the passage leaves a fair amount to be desired. That etymological tidbit about the spine of a book looks like nonsense on the face of it and turns out, on further investigation, to be nonsense. Gutenberg's invention of the printing press, meanwhile, can't be precisely dated, while the process by which the codex succeeded the scroll is well underway 100 years before, and still wasn't complete 300 years after. The date given here. A few mistakes are perhaps inevitable in a book of this length, but when the words insert time is passing style montage constitute the least questionable part of the historical account, it is hard to view the author as having any great authority on the subject. So maybe I won't order the book, and that might not be worth it. I believe that was it for that was it for this issue of the TLS. Lots of stuff for me to clip out, lots of stuff to save, but now we have books. And if I knew how to do timestamps, I would let you know. I will write in the description, fast forward half an hour to get to the books. Now we will do, with 2 packages, we'll do those, and then we'll be done. Beautiful, beautiful Sunday. And I will try very hard not to rant about the books. I'll try very hard to do that. I managed to avoid ranting, mostly, here. So, okay, well, I'm not going to rant about this first one, that's for sure. Oh my. Okay, this is from the folks at Yale. This comes out on 1st of November, just a day away. This is by Denise Giganti, and it is Book Madness, a story of book collectors in America. Look at that cover. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, well, this is just like yesterday. We had a lot of ranting, but we also had an absolute bullseye of a Steve book. Charles Lamb's Library caused a sensation when it was sold in New York in 1848. The transatlantic book world watched as the relics of a man revered as the patron saint of book collectors were dispersed. Following those books through the stories of bibliophiles who shaped intellectual life in America, booksellers, publishers, journalists, editors, bibliographers, librarians, actors, antiquarians, philanthropists, politicians, poets, clergymen, the author brings to life a lost world of letters at a time when Americans were busy assembling the country's major public, university, and society libraries. So is this all about Lamb's Library? Is that the whole thing that this is about? Let us check for the Brattle Bookshop. Will be one thing that we can do. Boston Public Library is in here quite a bit. That's good. Okay, the Brattle is not in here. Let's just check, just for the fun of it, for George Goodspeed. No. Okay, so I don't have a skin in this game. That's great. That's great. This is about, I think it's just going to trace one book collection dispersed throughout America. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I love books about books. This is just a perfect example. Great. Okay, so the first of 2 books, complete success. Let's hope we only have to get through this last one, and then we'll be done. Let's hope that this is also completely good. No rants. It's a hardcover, finished copy. That's good. Oh, okay. All right. It's another Steve book. So this is 2 Steve books today. So the mail today is Steve books. You'd be easily able to tell who this mail is for, even if you didn't see this video. This is by Mark Salvestone, and it is the Kennedy Withdrawal. This is the finished copy of Camelot and the American Commitment to Vietnam, in which the author puts forward his theory that Kennedy was fairly cold-blooded about the whole Vietnam question. I don't have a sheet for this, but just in case you missed it the first time, we'll go through this again and then wrap it up. In October 1963, the White House publicly proposed the removal of U.S. troops from Vietnam, earning President Kennedy an enduring reputation as a skeptic of the war. And the author doesn't buy that. In fact, Kennedy was ambivalent about withdrawal and was largely detached from its planning. Drawing on secret presidential tapes, the author reveals that the withdrawal statement gave Kennedy political cover, allowing him to sustain support for U.S. military assistance. The details were the handiwork of Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, whose ownership of the plan distanced it from the president. The author's use of presidential tapes, alongside declassified documents, memoirs, and oral histories, lifts the veil on this legend of Camelot. Withdrawal planning was never just about Vietnam as it evolved over the course of 15 months. For McNamara, it injected greater discipline into the U.S. assistance program. For others, it was a form of leverage over South Vietnam. For the military, it was largely an unwelcome exercise, and for JFK himself, it allowed him to preserve the U.S. commitment while ostensibly limiting it. So, I have the advanced copy of this, but I haven't read it. Not all of it. I've dipped my toe in quite a bit, but I'm not reading it down in the weeds with a pencil in hand. I knew that I needed the finished copy for that. I needed whatever notes and bibliography there are in here. Although, is this going to be another modern history book where there is no bibliography? That would be absolutely scandalous. Let's take a look here. Okay, here we have notes. Okay, dozens of pages of notes. That's great. Okay. Notes continuing. That's great. Oh, then it moves to acknowledgments. There is no bibliography in this work of history. What on earth? What on earth? This is Harvard University Press. I know 2 of you are watching or will be watching later, seeing this video. What on earth? It is not the reader's responsibility to assemble an ad hoc bibliography by combing through the notes. It's the author's responsibility to do that. It's your responsibility as his publisher to assemble a bibliography and present it to the readers. What on earth? How am I supposed to take this seriously as a work of history if the author is having me root around and hunt for what he has and has not consulted? Anyway, I guess I need not have waited, because there's the bibliography that I would need as part of the reason to wait for a finished copy isn't there. I am going to have to comb through the notes of this book and assemble which books are consulted on which subjects and which ones aren't, and how often they're consulted. To say nothing of primary documentation, which likewise is not, that's the place of a bibliography, is to show me where the author went in order to get the information and where the author didn't go. Not to hide that. In the 3-card Monty of the notes section, with ibid and see opsit and whatnot. Anyway. So, nevertheless, whether I think it's a scandal that you can now flip a coin with a modern published work of history in the United States as to whether or not it will have a bibliography. That is just insane. That is just insane. Even 20 years ago, if you'd done that, the whole of the review of any review that you got would have been just the reviewer going on and on about that the way I am right now. That is just insane. That is an unfinished book. But quite apart from that, this is definitely this bullseye of a Steve subject. So now I've waited for no reason, so now I will read it. And this thing, Book Madness, a pure Steve book. So there you go. Nonfiction November, and also pure Steve books. It doesn't get any better than Books and Kennedy's. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. Sorry that this went on so long, but at least it was almost rant-free, and the rant came at the very end and was about a bookish subject. At least there's that. My rant at the end is that if you're writing a work of history, your book should have a bibliography. It seems so insane to have to say that, but I realize that hiring a bibliographer is expensive. It's a skill set. It adds a price to your book. Last time I checked, Harvard University Press had an endowment bigger than a lot of countries. So I don't want to hear that it's an expense thing. I really don't. I would, if speaking directly to Harvard University Press, I would say, please don't let this happen again. All of your books are in finished copies for the spring, but your summer works of history and everything after that should have bibliographies. Anyway, I will wrap this up, but I will be back. Thank you, Book 2.